This broadcast is inappropriate for all ages, right here on hashtag WeAreMovieClub. Salutations, I am Camera, and I am conversation ready. This is where we get together to talk about movies that we've been watching for the week or whatnot, and I gotta be honest, I am fucking disappointed in this one. Not only is it Potter Universe, which automatically lends to it being a fantastic premise just based on the world that it's set in, but we're supposed to explore all these neat little niche pieces of it and Grindelwald, and we come to this piece of shit. This movie was saved by the cast, and I don't even think I mean the main people. Oh god, the guy who played Bullseye, I can't remember his name. I like him, but he doesn't really add too much. Johnny Depp doesn't really add much at the end other than making the appearance. So, this guy that I can't remember his fucking name, and her are amazing. Him much more so. But they are fantastic for this, and Skinderfuck, or whatever his name is whatever. I really feel, and you can't see my mouse, that this lady is the main character, and he's just a passive aggressor. He's just a subject that this movie happens to. It feels like he does so little in it. We'll go ahead and jump in, but so we open on this magical fight, which might be a mass murder. We're not really told. Opens on a guy on a bench after that, and then something's up with his suitcase. He talks to it as it rumbles, and that's Scavander, but we don't know that. We don't know that he's a wizard for sure, but based on the title, we can kind of assume that the first speaking character that we're given is the main character, unless we're told otherwise. But as he's coming to America, he hits customs. The officer insists on inspecting the case. The Muggle switch is activated, which I thought was a cute and clever way to handle that. And it just looks like a normal case, and they move on. He gets to a crime scene, and a witness is making a statement to an officer that sounds crazy, which is historically in the Potterverse, that means that something magical has happened. It's because you're crazy means it sounds unexplainable. An entire house is basically blown away, and there's something burrowing about the ground, kicking up bricks and the like as it flies away. It's unclear what happens there. But Scavander has his missions or whatever, and he knows what's going to cause destruction for these creatures that he's in charge of. So he ends up following some kind of bullshit. I really don't know. I have no idea why he goes to the bank, now that I think about it. But there's a protester out there who's essentially a witch hunter. And a crowd is gathered. And Scavander ends up trading cases with the guy who ends up being James, this guy. Which is stupid, but it's what happens. So the protesters claiming witches live among us. It's so awful. There's nothing going on. It's a lot of money spent for so little effect. But Scavander ends up seeing the creature and runs off. It's implied that the I don't even remember what it's called. The Niffler ended up escaping from his case. Inside the bank, he finds the guy that he swapped cases with, but not the Niffler. He runs off, and he leaves an egg behind. James ends up collecting it, for whatever reason. The Niffler investigates the most well-behaved dog ever. You would think that the dog would be attacking this thing, but whatever. It runs off. It goes up on the lift. The little egg that Scavander left behind starts hatching. He ends up showing up somehow. He accios and apparates and collects the egg as it hatches. And then he ends up chasing the Niffler into the vault. And then it apparates both him and James out. James, I'm really torn on him, because the guy the guy does such a good job throughout the movie. But he's dealing with this character that's oddly written, and he is this amazing mix of taking it all in very well, and then like having sudden bursts of like, oh, I can't take any more, but I can't stop either. So it's really fun to see him act in this, and it makes you want to see him in more things. So I'm really glad I saw this for him. But Scamander, I don't know. It was a weird character. It's a weirdly acted. It's weirdly written. I just don't think there was a way to win from the start. But let's see. Outside, he's about to obliviate the American when James hits him with his case and runs away, which I always thought was so funny. That like the idea that like no one ever punches each other and like they always depend on magic. You would think there would be like magical mixed martial arts or something, MMA. But there's an American lady chasing Scamander around, and it turns out she's an American orator, or she was rather. She sort of apprehends him, and then she takes him to New York because he's not registered to have a wand. I guess he didn't go through magical customs; he just went through Muggle customs. But back at HQ, there's a bunch of house elf wand polishers, which I don't know why we included that. I don't know why that was a joke they felt they had to make. And then there's a free elf working in the lift because he's dressed in a uniform. So I don't know if that counts or not for him being a free elf, but it's good that we had some progression back then, if so. They head to major crimes, and the lady, it turns out the lady's no longer an Auror, and she's dismissed almost immediately, which is really confusing. It's like, you're not going to let me report a crime? Because she attempted to report all this, and like they wouldn't let her. So she ends up going to the basement, which I guess is her office space. And apparently they are using inter-office paper rats. And two of them like cut each other up, which is really cute. That like that's how you deal with things, but it seems really inefficient. And maybe that was the magical shredder. I don't know. But it doesn't have anything to do with the movie. That's a large part of what I'm saying here is that, yeah, it's cute, but it doesn't make any sense, and it takes you away from the story. It doesn't really show you what's going on. But her boss shows up to scold her. A guy from Major Crimes comes down. And I believe that's the... Oh, it's killing me. What is his name? Not Kiefer. Kiefer Sutherland's the name that comes to mind, but I know that's not it. Because he plays Bullseye in Daredevil. That's the wrong Daredevil, jackasses. Fantastic. Sorry, and I always forget this movie's name. Oh, apparently the next one's going to be Crimes of Grindelwald. So I love that we've not only have we created a new franchise that's just very difficult to manage. Put numbers in your titles, people. Colin Farrell. So it's Colin Farrell that comes down. Graves, I think, is his name in the movie. He wants to see the creature that got loose, but it's the wrong case again. So James got the cases mixed up for a second time within 20 minutes. Back on the street, James ends up going home. He opens the case. And let's be honest, I went to go get my laundry, which I need to remember to do after this. Out on the street, there's some more commotion that goes on. Something about an explosion and a hippo. James's compartment is completely blown out, very similar to how we saw earlier. But Scamander shows up to kind of fix it. The American ends up following him and stops Scamander from obliviating James because James is injured, which seems like a really odd reason to go about that. But there's a lot of stupid arguing about the differences between American and English, which normally would be very interesting, but it adds nothing to anything about anything. And it comes down to this stupid, like, outdated argument about Muggles and basically like how they're not to be trusted, whereas Scamander's very progressive. about Muggles for the time period. You got to remember, this is like the 1940s, so it's not clear what the rules on Muggles are, if you will. And it turns out, like, after they leave, they kind of apparate out of there. A picture falls down off the wall, and the Niffler had made a nest behind it, which I thought was funny. Because he's kind of like the comical Wile E. Coyote character, or Roadrunner character, really, and they're Wile E. Coyote. Out on the street, there's something invisible playing about. Yeah, it's very unclear. Like, I don't know. They don't give you enough information to be curious about things. They just suddenly go, oh, deal with it. Or they're like, you don't know what's going on? Deal with it. It's very much of the opinion that this is my movie, bitch. You're going to do what I say. And I don't like that when directors or writers like come with that approach. It's up to me how I enjoy your movie. And quite frankly, this did not do it for me. Back at a newspaper office where we had those sort of things, the Salem people, the witch hunters, if you will, come in looking for help with outreach. They're pretty quickly dismissed, if you will. And then, fuck me, the newspaper guy who's running for like senator or something too, on top of that, kind of like gives a really out of line comment to the young man about his flyers or whatever, because he happens to drop one. Tina's the American. Okay. Back at Tina's apartment, Tina's sister's there, Quinn, I think. And there's lots of unnecessary magic going on, like brushes and like dishes washing themselves, brooms sweeping up, things like that. And then she ends up using magic to cook for them, and James is basically in love the entire time. It turns out she's also psychic. Yeah, that was a confusing plot point. This movie is incredibly, like, on the version we watched was incredibly quiet. So, like, the whole movie, like, we're asking each other what they're talking about and everything. Well, let's stop then. He's, like, hitting me with his tail. I'm sorry, after the 100th time, it's whatever. Out on the street, there's, like, a stare down between Graves, the wizard, and the witch hunter boy. I can't remember his name, but it turns out the witch hunter is an informant for the wizard. It's kind of obvious that like he wants to be a wizard, and he's trying to gain favor towards that. And he's helping the wizard seek out a prophetic child. And it's really, I gotta mention, there's a really uncomfortable moment there where it's like Graves is kind of coming off kind of predatory, and we know it's because the kid is part of his evil plot, but at the same time it feels like there's another sexual component there or something, which is actually kind of our first hint that it's Grindelwald disguised, or in a disguise of sorts, dealing with this, because we know from the previous Harry Potter books and various outreach from that Grindelwald and Dumbledore were supposedly gay together. I think Rowling has confirmed as such. So we know that his proclivity is that way. So if famous characters from the past were going to show up like that, they would, in theory, have the same appetite. And the kid's old enough to basically be an adult, so it's not creepy in that way. So at Tina's, they prep to spend the night, and Scamander and James go into the case, and Scamander shows them all his creatures and such. I think I'm going to shortcut this, because I could go through and list all the stupid things that were shown, but the only one that really matters is this pseudo-griffin thing called Frank, and that doesn't matter till later. But they go through all these weird things, and the only other thing that matters is an Obscurus, which is this sentient gas cloud thing. Everything else is there is kind of funny, whatever, but it doesn't add anything to the story. But he does kind of convince James to help him get the creature, or round up his creatures, and then so he can leave and get them back to where they need to be. They end up leaving the case. Salem House. The mother is waiting up for the boy, if you will. The boy hands over his belt. There's an implied beating that happens. There's a girl at the bottom of the stairs, and it's implied very heavily that she has to be the chosen one. I guess that's why she's there. We cut to the ice pond, and there's this glowing dragon thing under the ice. So whatever was digging under the road before, in theory, like this is one of the creatures that Scavander's after. Out on the street, James and Scavander are hunting the Niffler. I don't know why the Niffler takes priority. I really don't. Maybe it's just he's the most obvious. But it's in a shop window, and Scavander ends up breaking it to get the Niffler. And there's a comical kind of bull in the china shop routine where the Niffler is like hanging off the chandelier, and Scavander's after him. So whatever. The case ends up trying to pop open, and James is clever enough to actually close it up. But after Scavander nabs the Niffler, the cops nab them, and then a lion shows up. So the cops have to deal with the lion and allow Scavander to apparate them out of there. I don't know, Deus Ex Lion is funny as hell to me. So they apparate to a park where an ostrich runs by. And if you're familiar with New York at all, because that's where they're at, there's a zoo near Central Park. It's Central Park Zoo. So if someone was letting animals out of the zoo, it's very sensible that they would go to the park, as it's like next door. Back at Tina's, this Quinn, that's her name, sorry, ends up coming in with Coco, and I actually felt bad. Like, she does a good enough job that, and James prepped it earlier, actually, so I'm being manipulated. James well, what if they made Coco, or she made Coco, or she went to make Coco for us? Like, we can't just leave. So sure enough, Quinn shows up with Coco, and I actually felt bad because she was sad that they left without saying goodbye. And her and James are perfect for one another for whatever the reason. And just character to character, if you will, but like they both are far better actors than the other two, in my opinion. So they come out on top. So at the park / zoo thing, as they do go past like cages and such, there's a thing that's in heat, and English attempts to distract it by using a musk. And for whatever reason, James ends up sniffing at it, and then a seal throws a stick at him. I gotta move on because I can't explain to you how frustrating that is that happened. But the musk spills, and then the thing goes after James because now he smells all sexy. Power of boners. And then a monkey steals Scavander's wand, which we've also already learned too that you don't necessarily need your wand to do magic, but if you're trying to focus into certain things, a wand helps. So he should be able to get it back from the monkey fairly easily, but of course he doesn't want to hurt the monkey, so maybe that's part of it. But okay, so the thing's chasing James across the ice pond. Scavander gets it back in the case as it gets close enough to lick. Jacob is his name. I'm sorry. The whole time I've been calling him James. That's how bad movies are about addressing their characters. In this one in particular, because it's like I had to put effort into figuring out who people were. And then Scavander's such a complicated name when the movie's being told so quietly that I didn't understand that was his name. Of course, I fucked up Jacob too. So, funny that Tina is spying on them from the bridge. They go into the case, and then she sits on it. So, in theory, like, she has them trapped, I think is the point. I guess his name is Newt Scamander. See, I still have it wrong. Fuck. The only reason I saw this is because IBM has a Harry Potter versus Newt Scamander thing. So there's a rally for the senator candidate from the dick from the office. Everything goes dark and like something attacks him. It rips him up, brings him up like 40 feet in the air and drops him. And witches are blamed because it's such an unexplainable thing. Back in Magical Court, I did not note that, but Tina is trying to expose Scamander, for being unregistered wizard, basically apostates. I can't believe that's a thing in America. Like that, we basically on the magical end went Nazi. Before there were Nazis, technically this is the 1940s. We're essentially mimicking the Magical Person Registration Act, which is why this fucking exists. Because we had a shitty version of Civil War happen, and so they're trying to capitalize on that. Granted, this came out earlier than Civil War, I think, or maybe they came out around the same time. Because this came out in 2016. Let's look for Civil War. Let's figure out when 2016. So they came around the same time. So like they're trying to capitalize. Oh man, Kevin Smith talking to Nathan Fillion on IMDb, or the Twitch's IMDb's Twitch channel. Kevin's looking thin. Shit. So. Yeah, so they're trying to capitalize on that sort of thing. It just doesn't make sense to me. But Scamander's whole point is that he begs that his creatures not be hurt, that they're not dangerous, and they're dealing with an Obscurus in town that's acting up. So they're very concerned that he's a magical creature person, and there's a magical creature tearing the town up. It's just 1 to 1 equals 3, right? But Tina, because she didn't report them properly, even though she tried, and she didn't have the balls to stand up and or the guts to stand up and call out Graves, because Graves even came down to see them about it. But she gets arrested for withholding information, which is horseshit, and that must be Graves pulling strings, if we're being honest. Back at Salem House, the creepy little girl singing a creepy little song, and apparently they're all supposed to pass out leaflets, right? Because they're supposed to be spreading the word that the magic is real and that we should be executing witches. And they're scorned against dumping them. And of course, she immediately goes out to the street and throws them all up in the air and is done for the day. Back at prison, they start trying to interrogate Scamander and Tina. And there's so much fucking mumbling during this particular set of scenes that I honestly couldn't get by with what they were saying. But they review Scamander's history, including possible involvement with Grindelwald, which is funny. Graves summons an Obscurus, which I think is Scamander's Obscurus that's in his trunk. And it's supposedly harmless without a host, without somebody working with it. Which would be called an obscuriole, to guide it into destruction, but you don't want to touch it yourself. So they're very concerned that he brought something that was potentially that dangerous into town when there's an Obscurus kind of on the loose. So they're both sentenced, and fuck me if I know to what, because they are not clear and they're all mumbly. Hate the audio in this fucking movie. In the cell, Tina's memory is taken and put into this cell to entice her. Back at HQ, Quinn shows up to try to save Jacob, because I don't know what's going to happen to him, honestly. Back in the cell, Tina's reliving memories. Scamander finally manages to escape using the few creatures that he keeps on his person, which he wasn't searched or anything. Maybe they were looking for objects instead of creatures, and they used magic, which is very faulty in this world because they don't expect conventional methods. But a wand hits the floor, and it turns the floor into some kind of liquid, acid, grabby thing, which tries to eat Tina, and she has to jump over it to get to him, and he has to try to kind of catch her. It's a really kind of weird, sweet moment, but whatever. And then they go to fight their way out. They end up meeting up with Quinn and Jacob, and then they all get in the case for Quinn to walk them out. And she comes really close to somebody noticing her, but she kind of talks her way out of it. Like, who cares, really? Like, the point is they get out of there. It's not done very well, but they get it done. So again, Graves meets with Credence, who is the boy I was talking about. And he gives him a symbol of the Deathly Hallows to try to summon him. This is the next huge clue that this is Grindelwald, because Grindelwald used the Deathly Hallows as his symbol for time, and that was mentioned in the Harry Potter movies, the last two, I think. So on the roof, they chat about how to. On the roof, the good guys chat about how to go about getting the rest of the creatures. And then they visit a speakeasy. In the speakeasy, Jacob's just kind of thrown into this magical world of all sorts of humanoids. There's goblins and ogres and stuff in here. Or not ogres, maybe. Maybe, yeah, I think there's one ogre, if I remember right. Or maybe it's a half-giant. But they talk to a goblin for information, and Scamander trades his bow truckle for it. And then the magical police show up. The goblin obviously sold them out. And they end up stealing the bow truckle back and apparating out of there. Which, I don't understand why the magical police have such a time locating them when they showed up to find them. It's very, very befuddling that, like, the magical police do anything but capture them. I think Jacob ends up punching the goblin. That's how they get the bow truckle back. I could be wrong. Back at Salem House, Credence finds a wand under the young girl's bed. Which I think is funny, considering what happens. But he goes, but then he goes to try to take the beating for her, because he doesn't want her beaten. And then she steps in to claim the beating anyways. And then it's seen that she accidentally magics the belt away from the mother. And then the Obscurus attacks the mother. But to be honest, all three of them look pretty horrified in the moment. Out on the street, a group notices a purse walking on its own, and some kind of monkey thief. Supposedly it can see the future for a minute ahead anyway, so it's very hard to capture. But apparently it's babysitting something else, and it's a giant griffin snake thing that we saw in the case, in which I don't even think he mentioned one had gotten loose. But it gets startled, and so they try to catch roaches to try to entice it. Because the way apparently you capture these things is you put bait inside a tiny space, and it shrinks to go into the tiny space, but it won't grow past whatever it's in. So it gets very focused on the roach when they finally catch one, and they put it in a teapot for some reason. And they trick it into the teapot and put it into the case. And Scamander ends up trying to talk to the bow truckle because the bow truckle's mad at him. Lots of idle chick-chack. And there's a storm that happens. Danger! He senses danger! It's very stupid, dramatic, talking about the griffin thing. So back in reality, like, it just... Nothing in this movie ever fucking leads to anything. The overall plot is strung together just barely. And we're supposed to be amazed at these wonders and things, but they don't mean anything. And just having, like, oh, look at the thingy, isn't enough for me, and it's not there long enough to any fair point for people to get into it. At least in Transformers, like, there's big robots doing a thing for a purpose, and then that's the cool spectacle. Just seeing a couple bow truckles run around on a tree doesn't really do it for me, I'm just saying. So, back in reality, Graves is stalking through Wand Out. He finds the mother dead, Credence crying. Graves demands to know where the girl is, and then Graves reveals to Credence that Credence is a squib, because apparently he found out that, like, he was magical born, but doesn't think he can use magic, and so he tells him he'll never do magic. And then Graves finds the little girl, because apparently the prophecy centered on a 10-year-old girl, whatever. And maybe Credence is a girl, and Credence is just 8 years late. I don't know. I'm sorry, Graves is 8 years late finding Credence. Maybe. That could be an explanation if Credence was a girl that was raised as a boy. Maybe? That's actually really interesting. That makes the movie 10 times more interesting than it is without that theory. But Graves ends up finding a little girl. She's hiding and crying. And then the walls start falling away. And it turns out that Credence isn't a squib after all. I'm so glad they let the suspense build on that one for longer than 10 seconds. Jesus. And then Graves apparates away as the Obscurus attacks. And this becomes like a chase scene, essentially. Which irritates me that you can see the apparitions. They do it a lot better in this, where it's a bunch of like lines looping in on itself. Because in like Order of the Phoenix and stuff, they had like streaming lights and black clouds floating around while they cast magic, which is bullshit because it was supposed to be a big deal that Voldemort flew. This is a big thing for me in the Potter universe. I'm gonna let it go. But out on the street, the group apparates onto the scene. Graves tries to reveal or recruit Credence, and is not well received because he already kind of pissed him off. Let's be honest. Let's see. Tina ends up engages Graves. He throws a car at her and apparates. I love that reaction. It's just like, what? You have a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. Off on the roof, Scamander tries to reason with Credence, who has now become the Obscurial, and like, so now it's literally Credence flying around as the Obscurus to attack everybody. Graves ends up using the Aurors to secure the area because none of them realize that he's in on it. Down on the railway, like there's the subway, if you will. Scamander attempts to talk to Credence again. He's starting to make progress with him and talk him down, and then Graves attacks because he's a super dick. And he whoops Scamander pretty well because Scamander's not a magical fighter, if you will. Credence ends up crying. He obscures and attacks Graves again. Tina manages to stop him. The Aurors roll in and kill Credence, which is a fun, uplifting way to deal with the problem. Graves makes a stand against the law, kind of calls them out for what they did to Credence and what's happening here. And all he's trying to do is walk away, which you would think you would just let him, but the Aurors attack him because he's saying he's going to walk away, and so he counters. So I'm not sure what his initial crimes were that the Aurors came down on him for. Scamander ends up doing the magical equivalent of a sucker punch on him because, let's be honest, Graves forgot he was there. And the Aurors end up taking him. The Aurors are all kind of upset because they can't obliviate a whole city, but Scamander looses Frank, who can do that. But he ends up putting the obliviation into the rain. So I don't know if like he lets the Griffin thing loose and the Griffin thing pees in the cloud, and then the pee obliviates everyone as it rains down on them. Maybe, I don't know. But like 20 of these idiots end up running around repairing the city. And then the president, I guess that's the term, orders Scamander to take the case out of the city and to obliviate Jacob. Which is understandable that he wants things wrapped up. But honestly, like, Jacob's in, there's got to be a way to, like, let Muggles in on magic when they're not aggressive about it. There's got to be a term for that, like, even non-magi. Magically inducted. Mims. Magically inducted man. Anyways, up on top side, they end up having this rather loud conversation about Jacob belonging, and Quinn offers to run away with him, but Jacob doesn't want them to live a life on the run. He agrees to be obliviated on the basis that it's easier for everyone. He's definitely a team player. I like Jacob, and so she gives him a kiss goodbye, and he walks out into the rain. And then he turns around, he doesn't see anyone there. He kind of has this moment where he's like, what the fuck am I doing out here? And so he just kind of walks home. And he wakes up having forgotten, living his life as normal. So he's back to the cannery, I think is where he works. But on his way to work, he runs. Scamander runs into him and trades cases. And I don't know why. I guess it's his lunch case is really what it is, because the case was like the inside of the case was designed to hold his pastries. So why would he drag his pastries to work every day? It's kind of my thought process, but he ends up switching cases with him. And there's enough something in there to be collateral for him for his bakery. Like he's supposed to take it to the bank and give it to the bank for collateral. At the docks, Tina says goodbye to Scamander. And then because Jacob was able to open up his bakery, one day Quinn manages to walk her way in, and we see them fall in love all over again. And it really makes me wonder how magical, non-magical relationships worked back then versus now. Because, like, even... Because I'm really thinking about it. Because you have half-bloods. Like, Hermione was a half-blood. She had Muggle parents, but she was able to do magic. A squib was essentially a Muggle that it comes from magical parents. And there's supposedly a lot of mixing at places, which is blood traders. No, blood traders are pure blood families that have turned on, or that have accepted Muggles and are Muggle born. So I'm really kind of curious, like, about mixing. Like, it's super racist, but like, maybe not back in the 1940s. Maybe they had to live in secret. And I don't know if she can give him memories back, but they can make new ones. It really makes me want to do research on this. Like, I want to start looking up Harry Potter facts. Let's try to develop those answers. Really throwing me, because, like, I'm trying to think of anybody who talks about their parents. Like, oh wow, I don't know. I just don't know. So I'm not gonna sit here and just stare at the camera and think. I'll go ahead and end there. I gotta be honest. I'm not a big fan of this movie. I probably won't watch it again if I can help it. And I'm not looking forward to the sequel. If we get away from the Fantastic Beasts center of it, I think they have the opportunity to write great stories. Doing the Grindelwald story arc would be really good. I just don't know if the Fantastic Beasts have anything to do with it. So, until you see us next time, have a great day from us here at #WeAreMovieClub. If you want to see anything else we're up to, go to click the annotations, and they'll take you to our other channels. Thanks for watching.